Thank you so much. Americans, what a great country we have, the United States of America. You know, when you think about it, the United States is the first country in the world that was formed not on a race, not on a religion, not on a royalty, but on a set of God-given inalienable freedoms and rights. That's what makes our country special from all the other countries in the world. Our Constitution provides the doorway to freedom of speech and religion and press and assembly. But I'll tell you, that doorway is framed with the muskets that first defended that freedom at Concord Bridge in Lexington. Think of those patriots and those Minutemen that went there and stood and took on the mightiest army in the world at their time and gave birth to our freedom. But what people forget is every day a group of Americans still have to go there and defend freedom. Our freedoms are on a piece of paper about this thin, and it's up to us, all of us, each day to defend them. So I hope as we talk back and forth in a way that you never see on ABC, NBC, and CBS, we'll keep in mind that American freedom that makes our country so special. Yes, sir. How you doing today? It's great to see you. Boy Scouts of America, what a great organization. I learned to shoot in the Boy Scouts.
I've heard that 13 kids die a day from firearms. Is that true?
That's another one, and this is why I'm so happy to be here with you, because you never hear the truth on this issue from ABC, NBC, or CBS. The truth is, they're all criminals. They're violent gangbangers. Their ages are 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. They're not young children, as the media would have you to believe. They want you to believe we're talking about kids that are 0 to 14, that are somehow involved in accidents. And the truth is, we have the accident level with firearms, thanks to safety training and the NRA programs and the education at Eagle, to the lowest level ever in U.S. history. And we can't rest until there are none. Thank you. And that's a very good question. Hi, how are you?
Good to be here. I'm a retired school teacher, and I believe that the answer to gun safety is education. And I'm wondering what you feel about how do we make the parents want to teach their kids gun safety?
You know, it's common sense. You teach young kids not to touch a hot stove. You teach them to look both ways before they cross the street. Safety education is what makes people safe. That's why I'm so proud of the NRA. NRA has put over 13 million kids in the last several years through its Eddie Eagle Child Safety Program that teaches kids too young to be around firearms how to avoid accidents. And we do have accidents down to the lowest level ever in U.S. history as a result of the NRA's safety training programs, the 50,000 safety instructors around the country that teach Americans how to be safe with firearms, and it's something we can all be proud of. Thank you. Hi.
Hi. I've heard the gun ban groups say that the Second Amendment is not for individuals, that it's for the government. What does the Second Amendment mean?
You can't say that the word people in the Second Amendment somehow means the government, and in all the other amendments, the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, it means individuals. But, 44 states have it written right into the state constitution that it's an individual freedom, so it's our freedom. I'm very happy that President Bush and Attorney General Ashcroft have reversed that Clinton administration position and now put the United States government once again back on the side of the people, the individual, and said it's our freedom, not the government's.
Yes, sir. Mr. LaPierre, With the gains that we've made recently in the legislature, especially the federal legislature, do you see some of this onerous Second Amendment infringing laws, do you see some of these getting overturned in the near future?
I think that, one, Americans are on the side of freedom. I mean, they know that it's their freedom to own a firearm. They don't want that decided by some politician in Washington. You look at England, you look at Australia, you look at where the politicians broke all their promises. They said, register your guns. The people did it. They believed the politicians. Then they broke their promises, and the next thing was to knock on the door to take the firearms away. So I believe that this is our freedom, but we can't take it for granted. We have to defend it every day. And I would hope and yes, I would hope we overturn some of those laws, like Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. My gosh, an honest citizen in Washington, D.C. is prohibited by the Washington, D.C. gun law from owning a firearm for self-defense. And yet Washington, D.C. is one of the crime capitals of this country. So I would hope that in the near future the Supreme Court would overturn that type of law, and I also hope that the United States Congress will.
I came here for one question. You got to give it to me straight. How many times on any given hour, day, week, or month, or year do Americans use a firearm to defend themselves?
Every study I've seen, and there are several out there, and they all range somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million times a year, honest people in this country use a firearm to defend themselves against some criminal that ought to be in jail, but is out there walking the street. And it's usually on page 24 or 25 of the newspaper, somewhere buried away. And when we as Americans see that article, though, we think for just a minute, the good guys won one. I had an American Airlines flight attendant call me not long ago and tell me a story where she was driving home from Dallas-Fort Worth Airport late at night. And two guys in this truck ran her off the road and got out of their truck with a tire iron and came back toward her car. And she had a right to carry permit under Texas law. She pulled out the firearm and she said, "Get out of here." And they got back in their truck and drove off. And she called me to tell me that that Texas law, which allowed her to have a firearm to protect herself, she felt saved her life. And it does happen all over the country. And it's one of our great freedoms, and I am thrilled that over 2/3 of the United States now, 33 states, have right to carry type laws where honest citizens have the ability to defend themselves against criminals. It's a great law. It ought to be the law in every state of the country.
If handled impulsively, the war on terrorism could easily become a war against the American people, putting our rights at risk. When Rush Limbaugh writes the foreword to a new book, you know that's a book that deserves your attention. That new book is Guns, Freedom, and Terrorism. In the 1990s, when politicians were using crime as an excuse to attack your Second Amendment rights, Wayne LaPierre answered with Guns, Crime, and Freedom, the New York Times bestseller with nearly 1 million copies in print. Now, in Guns, Freedom, and Terrorism, LaPierre gives you the facts and the truth you need to fight back against those who are using terrorism as a way to attack your firearm rights and other liberties. Get your copy on bookstore shelves now or at WND.com or call now 1-800-336-7402 to order Guns, Freedom, and Terrorism for just $24.95 and the ammunition you need to keep your freedoms alive.
How are you doing?
Hi, great. Thank you for being here. My question is, what is the purpose of the National Rifle Association?
NRA is probably one of the most unique special interest groups in America. Let's call it that. The purpose of the NRA, it's the largest organization on the planet. that defends individual freedom every day. It's an organization about freedom. It's an organization about the Bill of Rights, and a big chunk of the Bill of Rights, which is the Second Amendment, the right of Americans to own firearms under our Constitution. And you look at the NRA, it's an organization where Americans can come together one by one, pool their clout and their resources, and together we can go out and change the history of this country. Not to mention the fact that the NRA has 50,000 safety instructors around the country. It has 9,000 law enforcement instructors. It put 13 million kids through its Eddie Eagle Child Safety Program the last several years. Hunter safety all over the country, recreational shooting, 12,000 competitions. But ultimately, when I think of the NRA, I think about freedom. And that's probably why all of you are here tonight, the freedom.
It's true. Thank you.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
Will the NRA be able to make sure that we will always have the right to bear arms?
You know, that's up to all of us. And that will be up to your generation soon. The fact is, all of our freedoms, it's up to us as Americans to defend them. Whether we're talking about speech or religion or to go to church, to be free in your home from search and seizure, to own a firearm for whatever lawful purpose you may choose, it's in our hands, the American public. We have to stand up for those freedoms. So the NRA, I assure you, will be fighting for that freedom, but the truth is, it's in our hearts. If we don't go out and defend it, we'll lose it, because there are politicians out there that will try to take it away.
If handled impulsively, the war on terrorism could easily become a war against the American people, putting our rights at risk. When Rush Limbaugh writes the foreword to a new book, you know that's a book that deserves your attention. That new book is Guns, Freedom, and Terrorism. In the 1990s, when politicians were using crime as an excuse to attack your Second Amendment rights, Wayne LaPierre answered with Guns, Crime, and Freedom, the New York Times bestseller with nearly 1 million copies in print. Now, in Guns, Freedom, and Terrorism, LaPierre gives you the facts and the truth you need to fight back against those who are using terrorism as a way to attack your firearm rights and other liberties. Get your copy on bookstore shelves now or at WND.com, or call now 1-800-336-7402 to order Guns, Freedom, and Terrorism for just $24.95 and the ammunition you need to keep your freedoms alive.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. My question relates to police power. Among many liberals today, there's a question as to whether or not ownership of guns by the citizenry can result in some kind of a civic uprising.
You look at the horrible terrorist attack on this country of September 11th. What did Americans do? They went out and bought firearms because they hear the terror alerts from our government. They know that something could happen. They don't know where the threat might be. It might be in their neighborhood. And they feel safer facing that threat with a firearm than without one. It's one of the great strengths we have as American citizens. In countries that do not have the right to own a firearm, people are left defenseless. So I look every day at our Bill of Rights and our Second Amendment, and I'm thankful I live in the country that has one. Thank you. It's good seeing you. Hi, how are you?
Hello. I have here last week's police reports published in the Bozeman, Montana newspaper, and they're about bicycle thefts, assaults, drunk driving, drugs, etc. There's no major crimes up there. No gun accidents by the children because of the excellent NRA safety program. The citizens in Montana have the right to bear and carry arms, therefore a criminal doesn't know who is armed. Why does the American press keep this information from the American people? And how can we get the word out to everyone that the right to carry saves lives and keeps the crime rate down?
That's right. I think we just have to keep working to get the truth out. If you walk into the newsrooms of ABC, NBC, and CBS, you probably won't find a firearms owner. On the other hand, if you go out to the American public, 50% of the houses in the United States have a firearm in it. You know, so much I've come to believe of this is about freedom-loving Americans versus a segment of freedom-fearing politicians and their friends in the national media. It's the Rosie O'Donnells. Rosie thinks it's perfectly acceptable for her to be protected by bodyguards with firearms because she's special, she's privileged. And yet all the rest of us, she thinks, hey, you're flat out of luck because you're not as special as I am. And it's okay for the rock stars and the wealthy and the elite, and somehow the mayor's buddies in New York City and in Los Angeles always get their permits. And yet the rest of us are flat out of luck. And I believe the American public sees straight through that elitism.
Thank you.
If handled impulsively, the war on terrorism could easily become a war against the American people, putting our rights at risk. When Rush Limbaugh writes the foreword to a new book, you know that's a book that deserves your attention. That new book is Guns, Freedom, and Terrorism. In the 1990s, when politicians were using crime as an excuse to attack your Second Amendment rights, Wayne LaPierre answered with Guns, Crime, and Freedom, the New York Times bestseller with nearly 1 million copies in print. Now, in Guns, Freedom, and Terrorism, LaPierre gives you the facts and the truth you need to fight back against those who are using terrorism as a way to attack your firearm rights and other liberties. Get your copy on bookstore shelves now or at WMD.com or call now 1-800-336-7402 to order Guns, Freedom, and Terrorism for just $24.95 and the ammunition you need to keep your freedoms alive.
It's nice to see you.
Thank you for coming. Mr. LaPierre, it seems like the national media is so great in being relentless in their anti-gun campaign. What do you think really works in stopping crimes that involve guns?
You know, I talk with police officers all the time, the men and women that are out there actually walking the street in the rank and file. And they all tell me the same thing wherever I go. The problem is that in places, and California is a good example, they don't put the criminals in jail enough. If you look, we have all kinds of federal gun laws on the books right now. Let's just take the federal laws. If a felon touches a gun, the penalty is 5 to 10 years in federal prison mandatory. If a drug dealer touches a gun, the penalty is 10 to 20 years in prison mandatory. If someone is illegally smuggling guns in this country, the penalty under the federal law is 5 years per gun in a federal prison. Now, take any city in the country. It's only common sense if you put the word out that tomorrow morning, if you're a violent felon, if you're a drug dealer, if you're a gang member, if you're trying to illegally smuggle guns, we are going to pick you up, and there's a 100% chance you will be prosecuted, and you will go to federal prison for 85% of your sentence. That's going to make you pause before you go about your criminal activity. But yet we don't do that. The NRA is in favor of that program in every city of our country. Police are in favor of that program in every city of the country, and it will make citizens safe the day we do it. Believe me. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. I was wondering if we registered our guns like we register our cars, do you think that's going to help eliminate the criminals?
I get so frustrated because it seems like every time we have a tragedy in this country, there's Senator Schumer coming around the corner with another gun control scheme. And what he does is he puts some lipstick on it, he puts some makeup on it, he puts a new wig on it. But when you strip all that away, it's the same old tired gun control scheme. It's register the guns on all the law-abiding people, make all the law-abiding people line up while the criminals get a free pass. And but it's a very good question, and we should. There is simply no reason for the federal government to have in federal government computers a list of all the law-abiding people in the United States that own a firearm. Mm-hmm. Criminals won't be in that line. No. All of the good guys will, while the bad guys go about their business. And we should not let that happen in the United States of America.
If handled impulsively, the war on terrorism could easily become a war against the American people, putting our rights at risk. When Rush Limbaugh writes the foreword to a new book, you know that's a book that deserves your attention. That new book is Guns, Freedom, and Terrorism. In the 1990s, when politicians were using crime as an excuse to attack your Second Amendment rights, Wayne LaPierre answered with Guns, Crime, and Freedom, the New York Times bestseller with nearly 1 million copies in print. Now, in Guns, Freedom, and Terrorism, LaPierre gives you the facts and the truth you need to fight back against those who are using terrorism as a way to attack your firearm rights and other liberties. Get your copy on bookstore shelves now or at WND.com or call now 1-800-336-7402 to order Guns, Freedom, and Terrorism for just $24.95 and the ammunition you need to keep your freedoms alive.
There are a lot of you here, I'll tell you. It's great to see you.
Hi,
Yes,
Wayne.
sir.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
Do you see any correlation between obese people suing McDonald's and gun manufacturers being sued for a gun that works?
Well, I think what you have is you have a lot of trial lawyers in this country that, and some very misguided groups that have as their agenda to try to drive the great names in American firearms manufacturing out of business. I mean, think of that if they'd succeeded. Here we have a terrorist threat that we're going through right now. What if they had succeeded and driven every great name in American firearms manufacturing out of business? Our military overseas, I mean, what would they do?
As an ordinary citizen, lifelong Californian, what can I do with an extra hour a week to make a difference? Because I don't want California to go the way of London and Australia.
Well, it comes down to staying active. I mean, help build the NRA to 5, 6, 7, 10 million members. There's tremendous clout there when we do that. That's almost the beacon of strength of how strong we are in this country in terms of protecting our freedoms. But it's also the day-to-day things. It's getting involved, walking precincts, making phone calls, writing legislators and telling them how you feel, getting candidates to run that stand for what we all believe in. And it's just standing up for our freedoms every day. It's not letting them back us down when they come at us. It's standing up to the media. It's calling talk show hosts. It's writing the station and tell them, what are you doing with this editorial? You're saying the Second Amendment doesn't mean anything. It sure means something to me. And it's that type of individual action that changes the history of this world. And it's just up to us to do it every day. Thank you, and thanks for being here with us. And have a safe trip home, okay? Thank you very much. It's great to be with you. How are you doing, sir?